This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider. The summer holidays are already over for some pupils. Children were back at their desks at Manor High School in Leicester this morning. The disruption for teachers isn't over yet, though. There's the partial U-turn on face masks by the government, disruptions caused by social distancing in classrooms, and there's the shadow of this year's exams fiasco. No one wants a repeat of that, and some head teachers think next year's should be delayed by up to 6 weeks. Our editorial column thinks it's worth considering.
Wise minds think ahead about problems on the horizon, so although it might seem early, a call by some London head teachers for a delay in next summer's GCSE and A-levels makes sense. The obvious reason is that although pupils of all ages have suffered immense disruption to their education, those who face potentially life-defining exams will have most to lose if the teaching they have missed causes a dip in their performance. They are right to point out that without a delay, it will be disadvantaged pupils who will find it hardest to perform at their potential when next year's exams arrive. Faster marking and flexibility will of course be required to minimise any knock-on effects on admissions to universities, but delaying next year's exams is a good idea that ministers should rapidly consider.
The Evening Standard's Rachael Burford's covering the story, and she joins me now. Rachael, what are these head teachers concerned about?
Well, I think their main concern is these students that are coming up to their exams next year. They've now missed a good 4 months of school. Many of them haven't been in school since March, and that's a huge chunk of a very important year. So even if they got just a month, even if they were held in July rather than sort of May, June, I think a lot of them are thinking that gives us an extra month at least to go through the curriculum and get them more prepared.
But doesn't that cause problems for things like universities who have to check what people's grades are before they can decide on their admissions? Won't it cause a big rush in the summer for things like exam marking?
Yes, that is one of the problems. So exam marking and obviously university and college applications. The thing about universities is they can be a little bit more flexible. I think, people are going through clearing right up until the starts of university terms sometimes, and universities do have the power to start a bit later. There is sort of a disparity between when universities start. Some of them start later in the year than others. So I think what teachers will be asking will be like, can universities be a little bit more flexible in this sort of one-off period, essentially?
What about places outside of England? How's the rest of the United Kingdom dealing with this?
Yeah, well, so there is a little bit of a disparity, and that is something head teachers in England are certainly said they're worried about. In Northern Ireland, they're sitting fewer exams. The Welsh exam boards have streamlined, 27 A-level subjects, but that hasn't quite happened in England yet. So, English head teachers are sort of saying, well, it's a bit unfair on English students because they might get worse exam grades. And they've sat a harder exam, or they've had to learn more things than students just over the border in Wales.
Is there any likelihood of this actually happening? Has the government said anything about whether they're looking at it or not?
Yeah, so there was a consultation Ofqual did. In their consultation document, they said there is a possibility they could be delayed. The Department for Education have said, they are considering a possible short delay to the exam timetable, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. And I think that's something head teachers are worried about because, they need to get their curriculums ready. They need to know what they're doing. And that's, something that is worrying them a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, something's been worrying them for a while about a number of things. For example, exams getting graded in the first place, and then there was the issue over face masks. How do teachers feel about how things have gone for them during this pandemic?
I think it's a very mixed bag because they've come in for a lot of sort of stick as well, teachers, and it is really important that, just for everything, it's really important that children do go back to school, not just for their educations, but for the economy and for parents who work and everything. So they're sort of kind of stuck a little bit, teachers, and so much now is about how schools are doing, how schools are graded. So if you have a bad year for exams, that really affects your school, and I think it's a sort of legitimate worry that a lot of teachers and head teachers have at the moment.